An inclusive event isn't just about checking a few boxes. It's about making sure every single attendee feels welcome, accommodated, and represented. But too many events look inclusive on paper and fail in execution. Today, we're exposing the biggest inclusivity gaps in event planning and showing you how to create experiences that truly include everyone. Let's get into it. All right, so I think in our world, we do talk a lot about inclusivity and how we can really be paying attention to that detail when we plan events. Mm-hmm. So I think what I want to kind of kick us off with our conversation today about, what are the inclusivity gaps that are overlooked when we are planning events?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, I think for me, it's, inclusivity has really broadened in the last couple of years in terms of what we really need to consider. Mm-hmm. And I think some of the gaps that we are seeing kind of catch up now is some of those sensory issues or environmental issues that people may have challenges with. We're seeing a little bit more consideration in that space, and it's become a real forefront of what we're talking about. So, we're seeing things like accommodating people that may have, auditory issues or light challenges with lights and different elements. And how do we then address how we're creating an environment that feels more welcoming to those people? So I think that's something that we're seeing a little bit of a catch up, but it's still there.
So I think, in the registration process, before you even get on site, there's moments of inclusivity that come up, and the, conversation about what your preferred pronoun is listed on your registration page. When is it appropriate to do that? Is it okay to have that be an optional section, or does it have to be a required section? And is it going to be listed on your badge, or, how are they going to use that information in the future? And I think, sometimes we just think inclusivity, do we need to just have, gender neutral bathrooms? Well, that check the box and we can move on, but it is so much more than that. So, I know, Sam, you've worked in some different types of groups on different types of inclusivity. Give us some examples.
Yeah. So we work with a group that is visually impaired. And I think what's really important for them is having those tactile moments, because they're not going to be able to see everything. So if we have an entertainer up there doing a bunch of juggling tricks, that's not something that's going to stimulate them. That's not something that they can connect with and understand. So one thing that we actually really love doing with them is doing a smell, something that induces their olfactory sense. So we've done a perfume Scientology with them, where they get to create their own perfume on site. And then they even talked about doing a company-wide scent. So every time that those guests enter whatever that ballroom or conference room, whatever it may be, when they enter that, they get the smell of that company.
I love that idea.
And they know where they are then, and they know, okay, this is where I am, and this is what I'm here to do.
Yeah, and it's like building a connection through that sense, which I think is really interesting. And that's what we're doing, right?
Exactly.
We're building connections. I love that. That's awesome.
So I think, bridging off of that, when we're planning events, should that inclusivity take the top priority, or do you find that kind of takes the back seat towards budget or maybe some logistical things,
Well, I do think sometimes there is a budget element to it, right? And that's a conversation you have to have, because sometimes in order to accommodate, the inclusivity that you're trying to accomplish, you have to spend a little bit more money. But not every time. There's little things, there's a great teleprompting service that, AI works with. So if you have some hearing impaired audience members, or the potential for some, it's very easy to just have a closed captioning automatically go right out of the speaker's mouth and right onto the screen without any manual entry because of AI now. So, that doesn't really cost anything, candidly. There's a very small technology associated with it that most production companies can engage. So there's moments where you don't have to be so hypersensitive to budget, but can you still have an inclusive element that can really make a difference for some of those audience members?
And I think it's a good point too, because that used to be an expensive cost. And so it wasn't something that was necessarily always within the budget reach, but now it is. So I think, we're seeing that technological advancement that's really, putting us forward with kind of considering those inclusivity things at the beginning.
Yeah. I think too that just the key awareness that we can have is really important, because I think especially with my generation, the Gen Zs, I think we're really big on inclusivity. We want everyone to be involved, and we want us to also be educated if we're not, if we don't know the correct term and we accidentally use it, it's okay to say, okay, this is how we choose to be spoken to. You know, that awareness as planners is super important moving forward, and how we address things with our clients, speak to our colleagues even. It's just awareness.
I love that.
Absolutely. And then I think there's another element to inclusivity that's, fairly simple, is dietary inclusivity, right? So making sure that our food and beverage menus include people of all different types of dietary needs, whether it's vegan, gluten-free, shellfish, some are preferences, some are allergies, right? But I can't remember the last time I did a program where there wasn't a laundry list of preferences associated with dietary. And I think that is one that doesn't need to cost a whole lot more, but if you're thinking about it from the beginning, it doesn't matter when the list shows up and the registration goes live, you're already accommodating for a menu that can, offer. Because candidly, I've had people say, well, when I registered, I wasn't.
And now I am.
I am, right? And that could happen for you. Someone like me, I'm pregnant. Yeah. But my dietary needs are very different now than before I was pregnant. And maybe I registered for the event before I was pregnant and didn't know that some of my needs were going to change. So the ability to be flexible and inclusive, just always plan your menu associated with covering all dietary needs. And that's sort of a rule of thumb now for most planners.
Well, and I think the other thing too is also thinking about, the calendar and what's happening. I mean, right now I was talking to one of my planner friends and what they're accommodating. I mean, it's Ramadan. So you have a whole group of people who are fasting all day, and then break their fast, iftar, at the end. And how do we accommodate, that group of people? So I mean, ultimately, events get planned. You're accommodating a bunch of different dynamics. So sometimes they're going to fall over those religious holidays. So really just making sure that there's an opportunity to build around that. She's considering having prayer rooms and making sure that there's, accommodations for when sundown happens, what they're feeding them. So I really think that it's a simple thing of just kind of that awareness, like you said, looking at the calendar, understanding what you might be contending with, and making sure you're making those accommodations meaningful.
Yeah. And I've even had a person that showed up to an event, didn't tell us they were kosher. The meat was laid out in front of them and they were like, I'm kosher, by the way. So we went out and got them their meat and came back and gave it to them. But it's one of those things where, you have to be aware of, religious, cultural
stuff to do on the fly.
I was gonna say,
cover a kosher kid.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions because I've definitely been in that situation before.
Thank God for the venue that we were at.
Yeah,
that's what I want to say.
Yeah,
they were
that's
prepared.
a big one. Yeah,
we weren't.
That's a challenging one. That's one you have to plan ahead.
Yeah.
So I think there's definitely things there.
And I think the other element is transportation. That's a service we provide a lot. We always ask the question, what are, does anyone in your group have any ADA needs, or, is that going to be on your registration again? But it's one thing to accommodate somebody that, may need accessibility onto a vehicle politely, and there's another way to do it where it's disruptive. And what I've seen a very interesting shift happen lately, where we used to get a very particular type of vehicle. They would, it would take a while for them to set up the ramp, and it would honestly be where we had a special vehicle for that ADA person, and we didn't want to put anyone else on it with them because the process of loading and unloading was so cumbersome that it impacted other guest experiences. And honestly, it impacted that guest. They felt embarrassed. They were just they didn't even want to go to that evening event, potentially because of how much work it took to create, to get them there, to transport them. Now, the transportation vehicles we work with are a lot more accommodating. They lift up and down. They have, very easy moves on and on. And, it takes what used to take, 6 or 7 minutes to load an ADA person onto a vehicle might now take under 90 seconds. And then all of a sudden they're happy to be a part of the group. They want to network on the bus just like we do.
Yeah.
And so to be inclusive for transportation is something that comes up a lot in what we do.
No, I love that. And I think too, learning inclusivity, especially if as planners are, coordinating different education sessions, understanding what maybe learning challenges there might be within the audience, especially when you really want to be able to provide that educational opportunity. That's something too that I'm seeing, accommodating people that may have dyslexia or may have, that are visually impaired or may have, might be on the autism spectrum. How do we then make sure that they're able to enjoy and understand the content that we're producing in a really meaningful and kind and approachable way?
Yeah, I think it's great. And I think too, on the point of the accessibility, I've been seeing a lot in DC venues is ramps. Ramps are getting put into almost every venue that I didn't see ramps at before. So I think, you know, not only are we seeing it in our day-to-day, it is how inclusivity is being for us worldwide. Inclusivity is such a hot topic.
Well, and a lot of those historic buildings that hadn't been updated in so long, they're all getting updated for the 150th anniversary of America.
That's true.
That's right. DC people
coming next year. So in order to make the updates they need to, they also have to update to get with the times and the ADA requirements now. Yeah. And that's why you're seeing all those ramps, which I think is not just going to happen in DC. It's going to happen in a lot of other
yeah. I think it's definitely
worldwide
historic venues.
For sure. Forget forgettable. The best corporate events don't just check a box. They make an impact. They're the ones people talk about for months. That's what we do at CSI DMC. We transform events from just another date on the calendar into something people can't stop raving about. Is that what you want for your next event? Start planning today at csi-dmc.com.
All right, so we're going to get into something next. We are going to talk about a little LinkedIn post that I came across, and it is from an accessibility leader at a big technology company. Okay. And she just kind of shares a checklist of, you know, that things that break down that must-haves for accessibility in events. So I'm just going to read a few for our audience here. All right, we'll start with her list of must-haves. Human-generated captions in keynote or main stages, physical accessibility like ramps and elevators, sanitary space to pump express milk if event is 4 hours long, accessibility shuttles if providing transportation, and a way to request accommodations for all attendees, like sign language interpreter, handheld mic for Slavier, sighted escort, and confidence monitor. What stands out to you guys on this list?
I mean, I think we've touched on a few of those elements already. I think the obviously I'm pregnant, so I'm thinking about the sanitary space for breastfeeding. Yeah. That one comes up a lot more, you know, mother's rooms or some of those build out ones that are like pods that you can just put into a foyer of a space. I think are really interesting, but making it like comfortable and not feeling like this weird black box that you have to walk into and like unapproachable. But what happens more that I've seen, you know, and this is my second child, is that the hotel rooms don't always have refrigerators that work, or maybe the refrigerators have weighted items in them. And even if you request in advance sometimes to have accommodations, I can't tell you how many times I've had attendees request those types of accommodations and then get on site and not necessarily get them. They didn't execute, or maybe they executed, but the temperature quality of the refrigerator was just not going to keep the milk. So I think that one's a hot topic for me personally.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. I think the accommodations one is a big one for me because I think it really highlights that not everyone has the same accommodation needs. So really providing an opportunity for attendees to put their accommodations out there of what they might specifically need in order to attend the event makes a huge difference. Yeah. You're not just checking a box and kind of putting everyone into one single area. You're really letting them kind of lead the conversation.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that one. Working with the group that I've worked with is, you know, having those people that can be sign language or sighted escorts is huge. So I love that. Okay.
Love it.
Let's go to our next. We're going to go to the list of nice to haves. All right. Disability help desk, accessibility guide, quiet zone to decompress, which is low lighting and comfortable seating, AI generated caption in breakouts, trainings, and demos, or accessible stage with ramp, visual representation of inclusivity. What are you guys' thoughts?
Well, I love a quiet zone. I think the quiet zones really do add value in a lot of capacities. We're just living in such a fast-paced world, and giving people the moment to decompress, even if you didn't know you needed it, you might need it. And I think there's a lot of different ways to do it with, you know, silent headphones and, you know, really nice furniture that makes it feel comfortable. But yeah, the low lighting, the sound baths, and all the little things that can be done in spaces to make you feel a little less stimulated. Because our events, we're trying to cram so much into a couple of days. We're overstimulating the audience, and building in enough break time to be able to use those spaces is the other piece, right? Like sometimes we build out these really cool, thoughtful spaces, and then we give them like a 2-hour window over 3 days to actually enjoy it. So building out those longer break windows, those just bigger kind of chunks of time where those moments can be absorbed and enjoyed. Those for me, I think are, they're nice to haves for sure, but I think they're higher on my nice to have list.
Yeah, I would say the disability desk is something on the nice to have that stands out to me. We always, can add a hospitality desk where, there's someone there to talk about what to do in the area and where to go to get your swag bag or where to check in for the tours. I mean, so we are always accommodating kind of that level of service. I think adding that one extra layer is a really easy and thoughtful touch that doesn't really require as much effort. It's really just kind of getting people put in the position that can accommodate those requests, that can hear from the people that may need them. So I think that's a great way to do it.
I will go a little bit against what you're saying, though.
Ooh, okay.
And I don't think calling it out as a disabilities desk is going to make them feel included. And I think that hospitality desk that you just described could and should be able to accommodate disabilities in a way that's inclusive. Because the last thing you want to do is be sectored out and feel, maybe embarrassed even to go to a particular place that's sort of calling you out as somebody that's maybe not the same as everybody else.
Yeah.
So I don't like the idea of a disability desk. I think making sure your hospitality desk is housed with the ability to accommodate in the cases of disabilities, but not having a true disability desk.
No, that's a good point. I like how you're kind of putting it together into one so that it feels like it's truly just a help desk.
And inclusive.
And
right?
inclusive. Yeah, that's a great point.
Combining the accessibility guide with the desk, an accessible desk.
I love that. Yeah.
All right, let's move on. Here are things from her list of budget-friendly options to consider. Clear communication. This ensures all event information, including registration forms, schedules, and directions, are provided in accessible formats such as plain text, large print, or digital formats compatible with screen readers. Next, we have digital accessibility. That means web pages, apps, emails, social media, and any other digital assets should meet WCAG criteria. Then we have signage and information. Use clear, easy-to-read signage with large print and high color contrast. And then lastly, we have clear and explicit labeling. Food and beverage stations should have easy-to-read labeling on food ingredients, especially for common allergies, like egg, soy, onion, garlic family, seafood, etc. Catering staff should be trained and knowledgeable on the ingredients, especially nuts.
I think the labeling thing is a huge piece of this. I think it's always been something that we as a destination management company are, always pushing, that we need to have clear food labels. The staff should be aware. I don't even think that's a budget friendly thing anymore. I think it's just a must have.
Standard.
Yeah.
It's a standard, and honestly our clients expect it. If we go into a venue and they haven't prepared for it, like, we're red flag on their level of service. And are they the right vendor for us at that point? Because we really do require that basically at this point.
Yeah, I would agree.
I feel the same way with the clear communication. That's a standard. We gotta have that.
And the signage, I think, is the other one for me too. You're gonna have some sort of signage at the event in some capacity, but I think big signage that you can see. One of my big pet peeves is you're in a room with 800, 1,000 people, and people put signage that's the same, that's eye height, which is lovely when there's 2 people in the room because you can see it. But when there's 1,000 people in the room, you can't see it. And what does that signage look like? Does it have LED elements to it? Is it easy to read? Is it using whatever their pretty font is, but then you can't actually read what it says? Does it have clear directionals and things like that as well? So signage, I think, for me, is something that should be included in every budget anyways, so it shouldn't take away from something else you were spending on.
Yeah. Love that.
I think digital accessibility too, I do want to touch on that. I love that. Especially because what is always in our back pocket? Our phones. And what's the easiest way to get information? Our phone.
And they've made it really simple to navigate what you need to think about from a digital accessibility standpoint. With the incorporation of AI, it's really easy to understand what you need to do to make things digitally accessible and to make sure that there's high contrast colors and things are not getting lost to readers that are looking at something on a digital screen. So I think it's also a no-brainer. It's not something that you really need to compromise on.
YouTube is officially the most popular platform for podcast consumption. So if you're loving this show, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. While you're there, don't forget to tap the notification bell so you never miss an episode. All right, let's get back into it.
Favorite time of the day. It is confessions.
Yeah, bring a little levity to a very serious topic. So I think this will be a good one.
Yeah. All right, I have a good one, so I'm going to go first. Here we go. All right. It was a bitterly cold January evening, the kind that makes you question all your life choices, especially the one where I decided it was a good idea to sell a dinner boat cruise on the frozen over Potomac. The kind of cold that makes your breath feel solid in the air, but hey, I figured people love a good evening out, even in the dead of winter. The river was so frozen that we had to send out mini boats early in the day just to break up the ice so the dinner cruise could actually cruise. By 6 p.m., my guests were happily on board, sipping wine and enjoying their warm meals below deck. Everything was running smoothly. So I did what any exhausted event planner would do after a long day. I went to bed. The next morning, I woke up to my phone vibrating so hard it nearly skidded off my nightstand. Missed calls, texts, hundreds of them. Something had happened. Something bad. A commercial airplane and a Black Hawk helicopter had collided over the Potomac at the exact same time our dinner cruise was out on the water. Yes, the Potomac. My stomach dropped. I scrambled to find the news reports. The accidents had been catastrophic, and our boat, it had been just a couple of miles beyond the crash site. Close enough for me to feel sick, but somehow, miraculously, the guests on board had no idea. They were below deck, insulated from the tragedy unfolding just behind them. All they knew was that, without explanation, they were suddenly being rushed onto buses and shuttled out of D.C. Then the final gut punch. Our client sent over an article from a major news outlet. The piece detailed how our boat, the one I had so brilliantly scheduled in the dead of winter, had unknowingly played a role in the rescue efforts. Because our cruise had broken up the ice earlier in that evening, first responders were able to reach the crash site faster. I will never forget the feeling of reading those words, the horror of realizing what had almost happened, the relief by sheer luck the boat had just been far enough away, the eerie, unsettling knowledge that a completely unrelated dinner event had happened in a tragedy that would otherwise been inaccessible due to the frozen river. I don't think I'll ever fully recover from that night, and I thank God for the calm, quick-thinking event manager on site and the incredible vendors who kept everything running smoothly. I'll tell you one thing, though. After that, never, ever again a boat in January.
Wow.
I remember that. That was a real story.
That's definitely a real story.
That was all over the news. I actually had to fly to DC a couple days later, so it was very hot, kind of eerie feeling getting the air and flying into that airport. That's crazy that you were a part of that. In a positive way. Really.
Yeah. That was me.
Well, I have a confession on top of that confession.
Oh, great.
Because I saw the footage of that boat. And the first thing that came to mind was, that's one of our vendor partners. We've contracted that boat before, and they're out there making rescue efforts happen. And I didn't put two and two together until, obviously, we're talking about this now, but that being the real piece that helped in the rescue efforts. Wow.
It was insane. Talking to the event manager after that, we both were looking at each other like, so close to just...
Wow.
Something terrible, but I'm glad that what happened through that was, we were able to help with rescue efforts.
Yeah.
And though I don't know why I thought I should sell a boat in January.
Oh, lesson learned.
Lesson learned. All right.
Hey, they chose to accept that boat in January, so there's something too.
They loved it. The guests, they loved it.
The guest experience changed.
I think that's the key. I mean, the guests had a good time and everyone was safe, so that's the key takeaway. It's a win-win for any of it.
Yeah, and I have a feeling I'll probably be doing that boat next time in January, 2026.
My goodness.
Oh, man.
I will read this confession. The client wanted an AI-powered menu system where guests could scan a QR code and enter their dietary preferences. Smart, right? Not really, because the AI kept recommending meals with allergens and at one point suggested a cheeseburger to a vegan attendee. We had to shut the whole system down and switch to handwritten cards while guests just looked at us like, seriously?
I don't know. I feel like AI, although it's come far, there are hiccups that we encounter, and it's not a human person. So I don't know. I feel like this could be a really relatable thing to happen, that you try your best to add technology into the mix and it backfires on you. So I'm going to go that this is a real story.
I might differ with you just because I feel like AI is still very new. I feel like an event planner might err on the side of caution with introducing such a new tech
and not
into it and not use it. So I might go on fake. I might.
Yeah, you know, it is a fake story.
I got one right.
News. You got
Wow, it only took you what? How many episodes?
Oh, gosh. My whole life.
You got one right, and I will say it was a conversation, right? But we didn't actually execute on it, and thank goodness, because we were afraid of all of those things happening.
All right, we're learning a lot of good lessons today.
Yes.
In quality event planning.
So with one more story. Ashley.
All right, so I have one here. Okay. Picture this, a Miami white party themed event, 1,000 college and professional soccer players, massive oversized furniture, and a very 8-month pregnant event planner running the show. Me. This was the last event before maternity leave, and I was determined to go out with a bang, and boy did I. I had booked a hotel room to crash for a bit because it was going to be a long night. Midway through setup, draping the room, overseeing furniture placement, making sure everything looked perfect, I decided to take that much needed break and head up to my room. Then my water broke. Cue absolute panic. I had to call my colleague to drive me to the hospital while also phoning my supervisor like, hey, surprise, you're in charge now. Oh, and I had to inform the client why I had suddenly disappeared mid-event. 1 minute, I'm making sure the lighting is set just right. The next, I'm timing contractions and hoping my baby does not arrive between an LED dance floor and a VIP lounge. Needless to say, it was one hell of a night.
Oh my gosh, I hope this was fake because now I'm having nightmares about what's going to happen.
I figured it was very timely to talk about this.
I know this is our last episode before
Oh my gosh.
I could be in those shoes.
Hey.
Okay, this has to be fake. Tell me it's not real.
I mean, I feel like this could be real. I mean, how many times do we see a woman? You're a perfect example.
Oh.
Doing her thing, being a BA, and you're like, okay, maybe you should be at home right now.
I've got plans right up to the very end here.
Well, I have to break it to you both. You're right that it's real. You're not right that it's fake, but even more so, it happened to me.
This is your story.
This is
Your
my confession.
Oh my God, and you had twins.
And I had twins.
Twins?
Yes. Yep.
Twins on the dance floor.
Twins on the dance floor, yes. So very lucky. I had a really great stellar backup plan because I knew that it was going to be my last event before I went on maternity leave. I had all the right people to call. One of my colleagues, who's our colleague now, was very gracious and zipped over and drove me to the hospital. And it's a story that I can always tell at any icebreaker event that always gets people talking. So
oh
that's
my gosh,
great.
I hope I never have that story to tell.
yeah, sorry to end on that note, but
Start thinking of the people you're going to call.
I know. Time to get my contingency plan in place. Oh my goodness, I need to maybe plan things out a little bit different.
Yeah.
There you go.
After hearing that story.
All right.
So thanks
Lessons
for sharing.
learned. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, that wraps it up for this episode. Remember, every detail counts, every moment matters, and every event is a chance to create a memorable experience. Until next time.